Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining our panel session today as part of TechUK's Digital Identity Week. We're very lucky to have Lee Smith, founder of Impact Match, here as moderator. She'll be driving, and I'm sure engaging and informative discussion on the incredibly important topic of digital inclusion within financial services. Lee's an award-winning social and digital inclusion expert with 20 years experience establishing community-led programs and initiatives. As well as designing UN guidance principles on financial inclusion, she's also created the world's largest representative digital consumer and set up the Digital Identity Academy for Lloyds Bank, which supports 400,000 people every year. Lee also helped to form and until recently chaired the Digital Poverty Alliance. And she's currently working with We Are Group to help deliver their vision for a world where no one's left behind. In a word, she's simply inspirational. So with that, I'll hand straight over to Lee to dive into today's session and to introduce the panelists.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for inviting me, TechUK. This is a pleasure to host such an esteemed panel of speakers. And we have 3 speakers today, which I will hand over to in one moment to just tell them a bit more about themselves. So we've got Peter Marshall, who's the Marketing and Fundraising Manager for SightMatters. We've got Haseeb Qureshi, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Conister Bank. And we have a panelist as well from the Head of Commercial from SQR, who is Stephen Webster. So we've got a really good wide variety of people that are going to be really insightful talking about the issues that we all face on this subject. And I guess at this stage, I just would like you to each introduce yourselves, if that's okay. And just as you introduce yourselves, if you could pertain what your own particular perspective is on this, but with no more than kind of 2 minutes each, if that's okay, so that we can crack on some of the questions.
Sure. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah. So if you're happy to go first, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll hopefully be less than 2 minutes. I'm Stephen, as you said, I'm Head of Commercial at SQR Group. We're a mobile digital identity application and eKYC platform provider, and our ethos is that we're on a mission to make the world a safer place. One of our core principles is inclusivity and also accessibility, which is why I'm here today and why it's something we're incredibly passionate about.
Okay, thank you very much. Haseeb, would you like to go next?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So Haseeb Qureshi, so thank you for the introduction. So I'm the CEO of Conister Bank, so a bank based in the Isle of Man. We're headquartered in the Isle of Man, but we're also regulated and authorised in the UK. So very important subject for us, being regulated by the FCA PRA, in particular Consumer Duty, and then that reference will probably ring bells in everyone's mind. And that what the UK is, the challenges we're facing, and not just in financial services, but generally, is there are core systems, supporting systems, and tech that is great when you're looking at forward-looking aspirations and how to use technology. But in reality, we all know that one size does not fit all, one system does not fit all. And so what I'm really keen on and what I've been doing with the bank is understanding the needs and requirements in the marketplace, knowing that there's different products, different customers, and really ensuring that we're giving the best customer service through utilization of the tools. So very, very important subject for the bank and financial institutions, obviously. And it is challenging. It will always be challenging because it's a life cycle, as is everything else. We just make sure that we're better at essentially utilizing technologies. And I know this specific topic is about digital identity, but certainly on the topic of exclusion, very, very important for us to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter Marshall, I'm Marketing and Fundraising Lead at SightMatters, which is a charity based on the Isle of Man, which supports over 600 people with varying levels of sight loss. So that's people who are completely blind, people who still may be able to drive. So we cover all age groups as well, and we offer a variety of services, social inclusion services. We offer accessibility to life-changing resources, and there's a whole scope there. We offer an audio library, a recorded news service. Of course, it's hard often for blind and vision impaired people to interact, especially with local news. There's accessibility issues there, so we provide an audio news service that's posted out to them. But really, underlying all of those services is our belief that blind and visually impaired people should be able to lead the most independent lives that they can. And that's where we kind of intersect with this issue. Digital accessibility is something we see our members struggling with, unfortunately, on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of work we think that can be done, and we're delighted to see the amount of interest companies on the Isle of Man, such as SQR Group and Conister Bank, are expressing in this area. And I think for us, we would just like a way to have our members' voices heard directly, and we're getting that these days, actually. So we'd like to provide a way for our members to talk to businesses and to local government in order for them to improve digital accessibility with their feedback in mind.
Yeah, very important. So I think that's a broad range. So you've got the bank, you've got SQR, and you've also got the charity. So really understanding the needs of the end customer. So with accessibility, you've obviously got regulation, which I would be interested in your feedback on as part of this debate. And just to give you some context, I used to run, or somebody in my team used to run accessibility for the whole of Lloyds Banking Group. So I completely understand where your perspectives are coming from, and the opportunity is huge for people with disabilities. And I think the latest stat I looked at, something like a quarter of the UK have got a form of disability. And so this isn't a marginalised issue. You know, we need mainstream responses to it. So I'm really fascinated by all three of you today, and thank you so much for joining, particularly as part of Identity Week. So how do you think if we're in the framework of accessibility, which is enabling everyone to have access to the services that can help improve their lives in so many ways, but particularly with financial management, which underpins whether we eat, sleep, are healthy, etc. How can digital identity solutions really help those unique needs of what some might consider to be marginalised groups and communities, to ensure that you've got full inclusivity and accessibility in financial services? And I don't know if maybe that's a question for Peter to come back with, and then perhaps Stephen can come back from SQR's perspective.
Yeah. Sure.
So I think when it comes to digital accessibility, the most important areas are things like finance. I mean, these are the day-to-day things that people need to be able to live independent lives. So I think there's space to grow in terms of accessibility, digital accessibility to financial applications. I think what we see is the same issues coming up again and again, and that's things like capture forms, for example, proving you're not a robot. Those things are actually really difficult for people with visual impairment to navigate sometimes. I think a digital identity solution, if you can have one solution that then applies to a lot of different applications or websites, that makes the whole process so much easier. So if that solution is very robust and secure and can be used on multiple different websites and applications, that's a really good solution. And if that app then is made accessible, then that really solves what can be quite a difficult problem. So for us, I think it's a really exciting, there's a lot of potential there in that space from our members' point of view. And of course, that actually goes outside. I know we're talking about finance today, banking and things, but that actually could extend to a lot of other websites, important things, doctors, for example, healthcare applications, things which need a really robust and secure point of access. Well, if we can have one solution to all of that, that's perfect. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've been working actually alongside SQR Group on the island, running focus groups on their behalf, working with them. And that's allowed us to identify some of the problems they're facing in terms of their app, and then they can solve those problems with their app. And then once they take that to market and that's successful, well, that's a really good place to be in.
Yeah, and I think your point on universality of the benefits, not just for the finance sector, but also other sectors. You know, I was just thinking about, you know, all the stuff with government, and I don't know if you saw that there was an announcement today from GDS and central government talking about how they're going to do some single front door kind of access to over 200 government websites, and it's the same kind of philosophy, isn't it? Making it much simpler, the user journey, so that people are able to access the services that they need when they need them.
Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it must be very difficult. When I was working directly for the bank, one of the biggest issues we had was in Alzheimer's and people forgetting passwords and just memory loss, you know, through one shape or another, and actually being able to have an ID that is carried with you, rather than you have to change the way you think or create different passwords for all sorts of different applications, I think is really key there. And it was surprising to me when I looked into it how many people suffer from poor memory loss, etc. So thank you for that. And Peter, like the fact that you're testing stuff on the ground with SQR is brilliant as well, and making sure that you've got user-led design right at the start of the process, rather than just retrofitting and doing UAT after something is built. So I really like SQR and your approach on that. So Stephen, now from a SQR perspective, given some of that conversation that we've just had, how do you think that solutions can address the unique needs of marginalised communities? And it'd be really interesting to find out, actually, and I'm sure for the people listening in today, how SQR's offer varies to perhaps some others in the market. So it'd be really interesting to find that out, if that's okay as well, please, Stephen. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll hopefully later on have a chance to talk some more about the work we're doing with SightMatters, which is incredibly valuable to us. For me, the very concept of a digital identity solution should be used to promote inclusivity within the financial services industry and other industries. I think that's at the core heart of any solution. And what we're trying to do at SQR is build that solution that will have a multi-use case. So to talk about our product, each user, so end customer of the bank, for example, will have their own reusable digital identity that's matched to their face, built into a secure QR code. Once they have that, they will be able to share with other organisations with the click of a button. So a company will request that they share their identity, and with a click on their app, they will be able to instantly share their identity with that institution or organisation, who could then use it for whatever they want. For our other end of, if it was Haseeb, he would be using it to look at PEPs and sanctions monitoring and those sorts of things. Going back to the original question, I think it's really important that the app is built with user privacy and consent control. The fact that we accept a wide range of data sources for verification, and the offering of biometric authentication for those without traditional documents. We're thinking of displaced people and the like. And Peter and I just had a brief conversation before this call about some of his service users using Blue Badge as forms of ID, which was quite an enlightening conversation. What is a form of ID? Sorry, Stephen.
Blue badges. So I guess for me, as not having the lived experience, we use it, determine it as parking badges, disabled parking badges. And this is, I guess, from Peter's point of view, that your users use these as a form of ID. And I think as well, making sure that our app and all apps are multilingual and have user-friendly interfaces is key, and user testing. And of course, collaboration with governments and regulators. And one of the things I know you mentioned before, Lee, was about regulators. And
Yes.
across the UK and Islands, obviously we're on the Isle of Man, and we have similar legislation to that in the UK about digital identity, but some of the Channel Islands don't accept digital identity at the moment. So
Okay.
having that balance as well and getting to talk to those regulators, and we have a number of people on the Isle of Man whose head office is actually in the Channel Islands, so they like a digital identity solution, but also need the physical documentation to achieve compliance in their own head office territory. I think a key thing to point out when we're thinking about any sort of facial biometric technology must ensure that the technology being used is thoroughly tested across multiple demographics and ethnicities to ensure there's no implicit bias in that. I think we've also seen the stories about some of the technology used in the States that was tested on white people, and then therefore had an implicit bias. So ultimately, I guess the key is to design solutions that empower marginalized communities, if we can call them that, and address their specific needs.
Thank you for that. So we've talked about how the intersectionality, I guess, of all of those accessibility needs, whether they be physical, mental, or protected characteristics as well. I think you touched on there as well, Stephen. So thank you for that, because I think the agenda can sometimes focus on physical disability rather than protected characteristics or on the mental health as well. So I found that fascinating. And commend I commend you as a startup. I help advise lots of tech startups, and particular passion for tech for good startups. So I'm really excited about not just what your product is, but how you're working as well with clients and charities. So thank you. Again, in terms of questions around challenges around promoting accessibility, would anyone like to answer the question around kind of what those challenges have been and any potential solutions to that to share with the group, and hopefully the people that are listening into this?
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, I can go first and then sort of talk about the experience that we've had with SQR working with SightMatters, and how I guess it was almost a watershed moment for us in terms of what led us to Peter and SightMatters, that we were entered into a fintech challenge on the Isle of Man, which was about digital identity for regulated services. So we entered that and went along with a load of rival competitors, and I was stood at the stand, and a lady from a gaming company brought along a totally blind person with a lovely guide dog, and said, "What are you guys doing to make your app accessible?" And at that point, we hadn't really thought about it, is the honest answer, which triggered then a conversation with our CEO, our founder, and this particular person that come to see us, which led us to SightMatters, because simply put, we didn't have the lived experience. And so that has brought us, after a number of conversations with Peter and Catherine at SightMatters, to these user feedback groups that we're having. And we've already been, it's from a development point of view, been very good. We found some bugs and fixes when we found some things to do already. One of the things that I took away just from, and it wasn't actually with SightMatters, but it was with someone else who was visually impaired, said, "I can't read your documents, your sales literature." And I was like, "Oh, why is that?" And they said, "I've got a stigmatization." Is that right, Pete?
Yep.
And said we need them in plain text. Now, I wasn't aware of that. So all these sorts of nuggets of information, by talking to people in different communities that may feel marginalized, I think only adds to us being able to develop a product, because we can all sit here without that lived experience and develop a product that we think is great for visually impaired people, but unless we test it with them, we don't know that it will work for them.
Yeah. And I guess so is one of the challenges that it's not just sight then is an issue, would you say, Stephen?
Absolutely. So there's initially we're doing with sight, but we're talking before about having a wider group across the island that would incorporate people from protected communities and with other disabilities. So we get as wide a range of feedback as possible, and not just from an SQR point of view, but I think for anyone looking to develop any product or service, that they should be at the forefront of what they do is accessibility.
I remember a lady called Rachel Van, who's one of the best accessibility people I know, least of all because she's a coder child, so she's born of two parents who are deaf and hard of hearing, and she really shared with myself and therefore all the customers of the bank at the time what the experience was, even for BSL. So you would think naively perhaps that for people who are hard of hearing or unable to hear, and I think there's something over 9 or 10 million people in the UK that have that problem, so again, not a minority issue. British Sign Language is not something that's written the same way as the English language, so actually you do need people to sign content to you. So there's a great company called Signly which looks at providing video software for apps to be able to explain how to use apps and for terms and conditions and things like that, which Haseeb might be interested in from a banking point of view. But yeah, it's the range of accessibility, isn't it, that is there, but and just lack of understanding to kind of walk in other people's shoes.
Yeah, I think for us as well, it's I guess being transparent that you can't fix every problem at once, but making sure that it's in your roadmap and that you communicate that to people. Yeah,
perfect.
I mean, do you want me to jump in for this one as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I mean, this is, for me, I think I mentioned it's a life cycle. What we've seen, and you will have all seen the same, is that there's been a lot of work on W3C standards, so accessibility on websites, for the interaction with the customer initially. And then institutions try to do too much at the onboarding stage. And I think, Peter, you mentioned that it'd be great to have a one-stop shop to be able to give that journey to a customer. But I think the challenge is people over-engineer it, and that then becomes another problem. And that's what we've seen, that we've really taken step by step. So I think you mentioned that, Alay, that memory loss identification. Now, for example, the way we cater for items like that is we have triggers. So Stephen mentioned biometrics, and that's great, and there's moves forward. But even in the past, we would have triggers so that we understand if a customer. Now, there's two elements here. One is if a customer's spending too much time on a particular page or a login or password, or essentially input an incorrect password. This is just a simple process that I'm providing for illustrative purposes. We would get a flag to go, look, there's two elements here. Could be a fraudulent customer, and I think, Stephen, you mentioned security. The other one is customer may be struggling to access system. So we really, and when you look at this as a customer journey, we really do split this for every point of contact with a customer to make sure that we're giving the right service. And the other thing is the challenge has always been the onboarding, the initiation stage of, and we talk about banking. So, whether you want a loan or you want to deposit a savings account, it doesn't stop there though. I think where people being financial services have probably struggled is they've really invested in that front end, but not then paid too much attention to the servicing, because it doesn't stop, does it? There's a service in there's certain trigger events where a customer wants to interact with us, change details, communicate with staff through certain methods. So it is, for me, the challenges, and the challenges are still being faced. It's making sure that you're interacting throughout the whole customer journey. There's been a lot, and I know we talk specifically digital journey, and I'm sure Steve and Peter, you will have seen this as well, that there's a lot of really good stuff on the front end, but it's the processing, the the customer, once you're servicing them in real time, these relationships aren't onboarding or one-time relationships. These are potentially 3 years plus relationships. So that's where we've seen the challenges. And actually, I see for financial services, the challenges is it really comes back to regulation. We've gone through these steps with the regulators, and it's really sometimes it's more so we're informing the regulators of what we see rather than the regulators informing us. So yeah, we are. I mean, I think I mentioned it. This is a topic very close to financial institutions because, of course, the offering that we want to give is for everybody, and we know that one system, one size doesn't fit all, but we also know that we want to give every customer a bespoke journey. So yeah, I would just say there's some of the challenges that we see on a day-to-day we have seen, and constantly working. This is a life cycle, and the more we get closer to the likes of Peter and Stephen and what they're seeing, it really does help us, and it informs us of what's going on in the market and what's actually happening with the end user, because that's important for us. That's where we learn.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on something Haseeb mentioned there. Over developing the solutions, that's something I think. So one of the challenges we face in terms of promoting accessibility is something that businesses should do. And it's great to be joined by businesses that are taking this seriously. But the truth is that for many startups, accessibility is just another load of problems that, it may be you open up the guidelines, you see a list of all these things, and that's quite off-putting. And maybe it's just easier to go, okay, we'll do that another day. Let's get the MVP out there. Let's try and get things moving before we jump into this whole openness can of worms over here. I think the point that we're trying to make is actually some of these solutions are really easy. You can start making them from day one. That doesn't mean you're going to hit all of the guidelines straight away, but it means you can make a reasonable effort from the beginning to bring people on board. And actually, there's a huge economic benefit to that too. I mean, it's great to provide an accessible service, of course, that allows people to access those resources in the same way as anyone else, but also the group of people that would benefit from these services is a fairly substantial group of people. And so including them from the beginning, that's a message we'd like to get across to businesses.
I agree.
That's a smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do, but it's also economically, it's a good thing for your business. I think in terms of regulation, if we're speaking on behalf of the blind and visually impaired community on the Isle of Man, and that is something we do, we'll represent that community in a public space. We don't want to chastise businesses that aren't meeting guidelines or we don't want to have a combative approach, which is you're not doing this, so we're going to try. We'd like to kind of create an environment where it's more we're sharing our expertise. We, as an SQR, we're putting you in touch with our members so you can get that valuable feedback and incorporate it. And let's work together to try and solve some of these problems, because it benefits everyone at the end of the day.
I think that's a really good point. And if we change the systems and processes that people have to use that are in some of the groups, albeit it's a third of the population or whatever, then you change and improve the service for everyone. I just remembered an example when you were talking there about being able to, I think there was we needed to put intuitive search on the site, because for people that suffer from dyslexia, of which I am one, by the way, so apologies for any emails you received from me. Although technology and ChatGPT has been a lifesaver for me. And actually that was for people that suffer from dyslexia, but we found that intuitive search then helped everyone. So it was done under the auspice of the accessibility program, but actually it was a service improvement. And I think the narrative probably needs to change around this being more mainstream than marginalized groups, because with intersectionality as well, and the FCA recognised vulnerability as a state, not a trait, so you can come in and out of it as well. It can affect everybody. I
had an example there, Lee, where someone was talking about developing their app so for someone who had one arm, but with then the benefit that by developing the app for someone who'd lost a limb, it would also work for mothers with babies or fathers with babies who are feeding their baby. So you're instantly then catering for a much wider section of the population by doing that.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you so much for that. I'm not sure where we are on time. I know this discussion is getting it is very interesting. I would like you to ask you a quick question, if I may, and probably who do I think could answer this best? I think maybe Peter. This one is a good one for you because you'll see it from all angles. So I'm really interested in what you think. I'm a big one for partnerships. Somebody in my team used to talk about partnerships for progress. And I really like collaboration between public and private sectors, and think amazing things can happen for people's outcomes when that happens. With the awareness that you have from all the different sectors that benefit from your services, what do you think the collaboration could look like between public and private sector in advancing the digital identity solutions specifically? And how can these be strengthened for better outcomes in the context of accessibility?
Well, I think it's really important to remember that certainly for a lot of our members, government services are really important. And so ensuring accessibility there is key. I think it's fair to say that as the web in general has developed, accessibility hasn't always kept pace. And so we're in a situation now where we have, and this isn't exclusive to where we are or anywhere else, but we have large government websites, often with a lot of legacy pages that are difficult to navigate, but it's some of the forms that people need are tucked away on fairly hard to find pages. These are often huge websites with lots and lots of digital assets on them. So finding your way to those assets is difficult for one thing, but then actually navigating, so say you're downloading a PDF, if that PDF is not made accessible, then that's fairly difficult for someone from our expertise, sight loss to use. I think that the benefit is that I think that the opportunity for collaboration with the private sector is to simplify some of those processes. I think if we could have a kind of a one-stop shop solution, and we are moving toward this, then that's going to be hugely beneficial. It's also going to make it easier for government because people are going to be able to find their way to those resources themselves, which that's more efficient. I think that the private and public sector, there's a huge potential there. I think that there's also crucially a really important role for the third sector. And I think that role is to make sure that people experiencing these challenges, and not just sight loss, but other accessibility issues, have their voices heard directly. And so for us, that would look like us putting people in touch with relevant decision makers at business or in government, trying to facilitate conversations around these topics with the people who will actually benefit. I spoke to Stephen about this before, but I think one of the advantages of going directly to those people is that you get the most important information straight away, just naturally, because the issues that they're going to encounter are going to be the catastrophic usability issues. So you get away from that checklist mentality. You actually start being able to list the problems in terms of their importance. I think the other side of that is that it empowers people who have these issues too. It's better to speak to them than to do an audit, using an online service, or to go to someone who may be an expert but who doesn't have lived experience. Well, you might get a slightly skewed perspective there, which isn't to say that those voices aren't important. And of course, when it comes to technical solutions, I think they're incredibly important. But I think when it comes to the most basic issues, hearing firsthand from the people who are most affected is key. I also think it makes sense. It gets you directly to the problems, which I think is a huge benefit, and it gets you away from that kind of, this is far too much information, how are we ever going to process this space, and allows you to kind of order your priorities. And I hope that's been the case for SQR Group with the work we've done with them so far. And I think that really is a model that we could expand, which is what we're looking to do currently.
Thank you. That was really comprehensive. So collaboration is key, and the role of the third sector, reminding us the importance of the third sector and keeping everybody honest, I think is really critical to that. So looking to the future, I'm conscious of time as well, everyone, and I'd like you all to answer this one if that's okay. And if you need time to think about it, I will give you time. But yeah, looking into the future, what innovative approaches and technologies do you foresee in the realm of digital identity? I know it's really difficult to predict the future, but just so we can understand where the gaps are now, and I guess what everybody on this call can look forward to between now and then, and how we can perhaps move the dial even further. And I'd love you all to answer that if that's okay with you all.
Yeah,
Sure.
Do you want me to fire off first?
Yeah.
Just going on, I'm going through your answer to the previous question, which I completely back, Peter, in that folks, there needs to be more focus on public, private, and not-for-profit organisation sectors, right? Collaborate, focus groups, and I think where that will take us in the future. And I think you all probably know I was going to say AI, artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence. It's a shame I don't have enough time to go through some of the conversations I had directly with Microsoft on, more generic and how they're taking what they believe the future is by way of accessibility, system tech, and actually bringing data together in a confidential manner. But just going back to public, non-for-profit, and private, there's this module of generative AI called large language modeling, and what that will allow us hopefully to do is some of the things we've discussed today. So therapy assistance, policy communication, really understanding customer behaviors. And if you can bring that plus the data from, and I mean, Stephen, you'll see this because you'll be pulling, reams of data. Absolutely. And you can see customer behavior, but bringing that together will ultimately give, and it comes back to one of our points, the one-stop shop for a customer. That is, I truly believe. I know there's risks, and of course there's risks with powerful solutions. There's going to be risks attached to this, but I think if we can get that right, using large language models to actually bring data, customer behaviors, and data that's in the public sector, in the private sector, in the non-profit organizations, bring it together and actually then for a system to fully understand who the customer is and how to interact with them. I think that really is, for me, fingers crossed that this isn't too far in the future for me. Certainly everyone's looking to develop this. I appreciate these things take time and investment, but certainly it will be interesting to hear everyone else's thoughts. But I've seen some of this I've seen therapy assistance and policy communication in practice. And policy communication can be as simple as AI looking at customer behavior on how they're using a system and talking them through what the policies, terms and conditions, what they're signing up to, how a product will work for them. That's a simplification of what of this illustration, but certainly that is, I believe, the future of the innovative future for ensuring that we have the right accessibility in financial services for our customers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can jump on.
AI is everywhere, isn't it? So
I try my best not to start any conversation with it, but
I can jump in here, and I agree. Obviously, AI and there's things like self-sovereign identity and decentralized blockchain-based systems. So there's all sorts of possibilities in this space. However, I think if I can draw it back to something that I think needs to be done, and that's probably is we need to reduce the digital divide. I think without all this new tech, if we're not getting digital devices to the right people who can use them in the right communities, then we're lost. We're going to be taught we're losing a lot of people. So for me, all this new technology is great, but having inclusivity and accessibility and user-friendly interfaces for the majority of people has got to be everyone's goal.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning that. I'm as the Qureshi shared earlier, I am passionate about digital inclusion, and you can't access any of this without it. And there's still, 1 in 5 people without the skills that they need to be able to benefit from any of this. And there's lots of work being done on that. And one of the organisations that I support, which is We Are Group, are right in the heart of that. They've got solutions to it, so they can bring you the device, the connectivity and the motivation and the assisted digital services to help you use those services. And they've got a whole range of clients that they help. So for anybody listening, if you're facing that challenge too, which I expect you all are, then do feel free to reach out to me. A little bit of a plug there for We Are Group, but they're doing amazing stuff. You all are. And I couldn't agree more on the digital divide and being able to access that. And that's one of the key reasons why I helped Paul Finnis and Neil McLean set up the Digital Poverty Alliance, which for any of those that are interested in digital inclusion as well, do have a look at what the Alliance is up to. It's a great organisation. Yeah. So we've got AI and the growth of that, and the ethics behind that, and making sure that that is managed responsibly. You've got the digital inclusion, which is a huge part of it, and could be a barrier to adoption for digital identity. I was in a train station a couple of weeks ago, and a lady couldn't access the Wi-Fi and to be able to prove that she had a ticket. So a ticketless officers and everything else, this affects everybody. And the fact that she was older and vulnerable and with disability, on top of that, how many regulations are we breaking there just on the Disability Act? So finally then, what else is there that we need to take into account and looking into the future?
I'll just jump in as well on that question about the future. Yeah. It's, I wouldn't be able to say with as much technical expertise as Haseeb and Stephen about where this is going technically, but just speaking on behalf of our members, I think where I would like to see this going is more companies taking an active interest in this area. And I think we are seeing that. And then I think ultimately, we need to get to a place where legislation has caught up to. I don't think we're there yet, because I think organizations need time to adapt. I think we're in a place now where we should all be moving and becoming aware of these issues. But in 5-10 years time, possibly before, depending how quickly things move, I think we'd like to see legislation in place on the Isle of Man, and I think we are seeing this in the UK too at the moment, that's more robust and puts the impetus on organizations to meet these criteria and start making things much more accessible. Yeah, I think we're in a really exciting time now, and it's great to hear the things that Haseeb's doing. It's great working with SQR Group as we are, and I think we're really in a positive place at the moment. So it's really fantastic for us to see.
Thank you. And I think that concludes our debate and discussion around accessibility, and in particular with regards to digital identity. And we've uncovered quite a few different issues there, but just to if I could just ask you if there's anything else that you wanted to share quickly to the three of you, perhaps one final key insight that we haven't talked about so far, and then I'll do a wrap up.
I think if I go first, I think, it's similar to what Peter said, is that this collaboration between all sorts of stakeholders and service users has to continue and grow. For me, I think accessibility should be a core part of any business strategy, not just with digital identity, but a core part, whether it's a pub or a digital identity provider. Yeah. And everyone should be benefiting from these digital innovations. And we need to lessen the digital divide.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Would anybody else like to close with something they may feel they've not been able to share so far?
I think the only thing I'd add is that, and I basically am sounding what everyone's stated, is that it starts with taking responsibility, and I think there's a lot of key stakeholders involved in what we're trying to achieve here. We've talked about legislation, regulators, public and the private domains, and it's just making sure that, again, certainly for me, in my role in the Isle of Man, and for the focus in the UK as well for the bank, we're making sure that this is part of our strategy, part of our objectives, rather than something that you talk about in passing, which certainly don't believe anyone does do. But Peter, you will hopefully have seen that from your own experience that the past 5 years has made a dramatic difference here. So I think it's really just that. My key takeaway is always that it starts with responsibility, and the responsibility lies with, I guess, all of us on the call today. So
Agreed.
And I think I'd just say, I think it's great to see what we are seeing at the moment. And I think the most important thing I'd like to communicate is that this is a valuable thing for businesses to do. It benefits them, but it also benefits the community at large. And in general, accessibility is very worthwhile. So it's great to see the movement we are seeing, and it's been a pleasure to speak to you all today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just to summarise, I think you've got great alignment there for those of you that are still on the call, between the huge banking sector, the charity sector, and also the tech for good sector, which is amazing to see and very encouraging. So thank you so much for all your contributions, and so much alignment there in terms of especially where you see the future. We've talked about the need for strategy, the need for responsibility. This affects everyone, the role of intersectionality, not just physical disability, which is an important in itself. The benefits of user-centered design as well as UAT right from the start, collaboration between all the sectors to be able to drive solutions, because by working together we're much better than the sum of the parts. And we've talked about some of the risks and benefits of future technology, including AI. So much there to talk about. I hope I haven't missed anything there in my roundup. I just want to say what an absolute pleasure it's been. Thank you so much, TechUK, and I hope you're having a brilliant Digital ID Week. Thank you to Haseeb, Peter and Stephen, and hope to continue the chat. Maybe we could meet at the Royal Society of the Arts, which is where I tend to hang out when I'm in London, which is a collaboration space for people that want to create more good in the world. And I would look forward to seeing you all. And please do check out We Are Group and all the organisations that have been mentioned today